Alright guys, how's it going? I hope everyone's doing well. This is my part 2 to the lesson Introduction to Music Theory. Music theory, like I said before, it's very important with composition and basically anything to do with music. If you didn't watch all of the last video, I know it's a long video, but I highly recommend you watch the whole thing. Otherwise, if there's some parts that you didn't watch, then in this lesson there might be some gaps, some things that you don't understand just because you didn't watch all of the last video. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So please watch it all, and then once you're familiar with all that, start this lesson. Okay, so this lesson is going to be specifically, this is the last part. We now know how to find all the major and minor keys, so then you can pick whatever key you want and then start playing music in those keys, right? And now we're going to talk about chords. Chords are the most basic form of musical harmony. Harmony is just basically if you play more than one note together, they have a certain relationship with one another. That is just what harmony means. Right, so to create harmony, you just put notes together, and depending on what notes you choose to put together, changes the feel, the mood, the tonality, the emotion of the notes. That's what harmony is all about, and that's the whole point of chords. When you play different chords, they all sound different, they all have their own tonality, their own feel. So this is where I'm going to show you what chords are all about. By definition, a chord is two or more notes played together. It's as simple as that. So if you play a C note and an E note played together, you're playing a chord. There you go, it's as simple as that. That is what a chord is. Okay? Now, the most basic form of chords are triad chords. Now, triad chords are made up of 3 musical notes. Okay, we have 4 different types of triad chords. Okay, we have major triad chords, minor triad chords, diminished triad chords, and augmented triad chords. Okay, so that's 4 different types of triad chords. And triad chords are the most basic form of chords that you can get. Okay? Major, minor, diminished, augmented. Now, in this lesson, I'm not going to be talking about augmented triad chords, because in major and minor keys, which is all we're talking about, augmented chords don't exist. Okay? They do exist in other types of keys and scales, but for now, just forget about that. In a major key and a minor key, the only triad chords you find are major, minor, and diminished. Right? So just chuck that term out the window. Okay? Forget about augmented for now. Okay, now, here we have our trusty C major scale. Right, you should remember this from the last lesson. If you play all those notes going up in order, all you're doing is just playing the white keys on a keyboard. And then, so if you start on C on a keyboard, and then you play all of these notes, you end up back at C in the octave above. That just means the patterns have started again, and you're just moving up. So if you look at a keyboard or a piano, you'll notice there's a set of keys, and then it's the same set of keys up and down the keyboard. Right, and all these different sets are just called different octaves, and all that means is they're the same notes, but just in a higher or lower register. That register just means, like, if you have something in the lower register, it's going to sound low. If it's in a higher register, it's going to sound high. That's basically just what that means. Okay, so C major. Now, you'll see here there are some Roman numerals below these notes. Now, from last time, I wrote under this key 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? all those numbers do is just tell you what scale degree these notes are. And all that means is, here, this E note for example, that is the third note in the key. So that means that is the third scale degree, right? So I would have had a number 3 under that to show it's the third scale degree, right? And here in Roman numerals it says number 3. Okay. Now the reason why I've wrote it in Roman numerals this time is because they signify what type of chords these notes represent, basically. Because you'll notice that some are in capitals, like this one, this one, this one, and this one, which is just the same as this one, and then these are lowercase, right? And they signify what chords these notes possess. Okay, so let's start, right? A major chord is made up of the first, third, and fifth interval in a key or scale, right? So if we take this C note, okay, we have our C, and major chords are made up of the first, third, and fifth. Okay, so here we have our C. Now, this is our second interval, our second scale degree in our key, D, right? D is our second scale degree, right? So a C major chord is made up of 1, 3, 5, right? So we're at number 2 when we get to this D, right? Now if we move up to the E, we are now at number 3, right? So that is our third interval. So that is our second note in this chord, in this C major chord. Okay, so we now have 2 notes. But in a major triad, or in any triad, it is made up of 3 notes, like I said before. So we have 2 notes, we have the C and the E, right? Now we need the fifth interval, the fifth scale degree, right? The fifth note in the scale or key. Okay, so we're at our E, move up to F, that's number 4, we don't need number 4, move up again, we're at G, and that is number 5, right? So G is our fifth scale interval. So now we have our 3 notes, we have our first triad chord in the key, right? C, E, G, C major, right? Every single one of these notes will have some form of triad chord. And in major and minor scales, like I said before, you have major, minor, and diminished triad chords. And if you take the C note, right, and you play, because like I said here, it's capitalized, meaning it will be a major chord. That's how you know whether a chord is major or a minor. And over here, it has a little circle by it, like a little degree symbol, right? That means it's a diminished chord, right? That's how you know what notes, when you figure out its triad chord, that's how you know what type of chord it will be, right? So here it's capitalized, so if you work out C, like if you're in C major, which we are, right, and you work out the first, third, and fifth interval, right, you end up with C major, okay, which is what we have here. Right, now let's move on to our next note. We have the D, right, okay. Now, a minor chord, instead of being made up of the first, third, and fifth interval, is made up of the first, flat third, and fifth interval. Okay, so we have our first, flat third, and fifth interval. Right. Now, a flattened third, like I said before, when you flatten a note, it just goes down one note. That's all that means. Okay, it just goes down by one pitch, one note. Okay, right? Between the intervals, so between the first, third, and fifth in a major key, right, you have two tones and then between the third and the fifth you have 1.5 tones. Okay, so you have two tones between the first and the third, so that is a total of 4 notes, right? Because if we go from C to E, right, to get to D you go C, C sharp, and then from D to E, D, D sharp. So that's 4 notes. Okay, right, now I'm in a minor triad, so the scale, these are what are called scale spellings. This is how you figure out what notes are in the chords. Kind of like sorry, did I just say scale spellings? Chord spellings. These are chord spellings, and then scale spellings are those codes that I showed in the last lesson, which show you how to figure out what notes are in a major or minor key. And these are chord spellings which show basically how to find what notes are in these type of chords. Right, so every type of chord has its own chord spelling, right, and that shows you what chords, what notes are in the chords. Okay, so between a first and a flattened third, right, so between a first and a third we have 4 notes, like I said, right. Between a first and a flattened third, right, we have 3 notes, because the third is flattened, so it goes down by 1 note. So that means there's only 3 notes instead of 4, right? So between there, we have 1.5 tones. But then between a flattened third and a fifth, we have 2 tones. Okay? Feel free to write any of this down from like both of these lessons, because what I'm showing you, like if you make a note of it, so say you had this sheet of paper, you know, to look at, you know, it'll be very useful. Here, so in a major triad, from the first to the third you have 2 tones. From the third to the fifth you have 1.5 tones, right? In a minor chord, you have 1.5 tones to get to the flattened third, and then 2 tones to get from the flattened third to the fifth. So it's kind of like the opposite way round. That is another way how you can check whether you've correctly found out the right chord. So here, the D minor chord, you know it's going to be a D minor chord instead of a D major chord or a D diminished or D augmented, because it's not capitalized. If you work out any major scale, right, the chords will always go up in this order and will always be those type of chords. So if you work out F sharp major, the first chord is going to be a major chord, the next chord is going to be a minor chord, the next chord is going to be a minor chord, that's going to be a major, major, minor, diminished, and then major. Right? It's the same for every major scale, just like how last time the major scale spelling is the exact same for every single key. Right? So let's work out our D minor chord. Right? It is made up of first and flattened third. Right? So D, we move up to the second, and then we have our third, right? Now, how do we know if this is a flattened third? Because like I said before, from a first interval to a flattened third, we have 1.5 tones, okay? So, D to get to E, we have D and D sharp. From E to get to F, we have 1 note, E to F, so that's 3. Not 4, 3. Right, so 1 tone is 2 notes, but we have 3 notes, so we have 1.5. So we know that the next note in D minor is F. Okay? Now, to get from the flattened third to the fifth, we have 2 tones. Okay? So, from F, we move up. Okay, between them, you have F and F sharp. Right? So we still need 2 more tones. Right? So this is the second interval from F. Right? So then we need to move up to A. Right? So F is the third interval in our chord, G is the fourth, and then A is the fifth. And between F and A, so F, F sharp, G, G sharp, right? We have 4 notes, 2 tones. So we know that because there is 2 tones between F and A, that is the last note in our D minor chord. So if you played those notes together on a keyboard or whatever instrument, you are playing a D minor chord. And we have now figured out the first 2 chords, the first 2 triad chords in C major. Now, let's work out the next one. We now have E minor. Okay, so E, I'm just going to write this down. G and B equals E minor. Okay, so from E to G there should be 1.5 tones, right? E to F is 1, F to G, F, F sharp, so 3 notes, E, F, F sharp. Okay, there you go. So that is our next chord. Like it shows here, E, it will be a minor chord. E, G, B. Okay. Next we have F. That will be a major chord because it's capitalized. Right, so that will be F, A, C. Okay, so remember, major, right, from the first to the third there will be 4 notes. So F, F sharp, G, G sharp, right, 4 notes. Okay, and then between A and C there'll be 1.5. So you have A sharp, B, there you go, 3 notes. So then you just use this formula to work out all the notes in all the triad chords. Okay, so G, B, D, that is G major. Like that. So we've worked out the first 5 chords in C major. Okay, next we have A, which is a minor chord. It is A, C, and E. Now, we have 6 triad chords in the key of C major, but we are now at this diminished chord. Now, what is the difference between a major, minor, and diminished chord? Now, the chord spelling for a diminished chord is 1, flat 3, flat 5. Okay? So we have our first, flattened third, and flattened fifth. Okay? And then between those, we have, between the first and the flattened third, we have 1.5 tones. Between the flattened third and flattened fifth, we have 1.5 tones. Right? So with the major scale spelling, we have 2 tones and then 1.5 tones. With the minor one, we have 1.5 tones and 2 tones. With the diminished one, we have 1.5 tones and 1.5 tones. So if you work out, so let's take B, right? B will be our diminished chord, right? Every major and minor key has 1 diminished chord in it. And then, as we can see from here, they will also have 1, 2, 3 major chords, and then 1, 2, 3 minor chords, right? So let's work this out. Right, B, this is where we're up to, because we have an A minor chord. So now we're at B, our diminished chord, because it has that little circle by it. Now, from B, right, to a flattened third is 1.5, right? So we get to B to C, that's one note, right? So we're at C, right? And then to get to D, you have C sharp and then D, okay? So that's 1.5, right? So if you count from B, B, C, C sharp, that's 3 notes. 1 tone, 1.5 tone, 3 notes, okay? So D is our next note in B diminished, okay? From D, if we go up 1.5, you have D, D sharp, and E, right? So once we're at E, D, E, right? So we're currently at D. So if you're at D, D sharp, E, F. Okay, 3 notes again, right? There's just 3 notes in between. If there's 1.5, that means there's 3 notes in between the note that you're on and then the next note in the chord. Or if there's 2 tones between the note that you're on and the next chord, there is 4 notes, okay? That's literally just how it works, and that's all there is to it. Okay, so that is B diminished. Okay, so we have now figured out all the chords in C major. Now, I've run out of space, but we have more paper. What I'm going to do now is write out another major scale, just so you can see that it's exactly the same for every major key, right? That is another very good thing about music theory. There are so many patterns to it that it just shows that the reason why it all works how it does is because it all just interlocks. It all just fits together with all these patterns that just follow the same rules. Okay, so now I've written out the G major scale, okay, with those same Roman numerals below it, the same intervals below, okay? So you would do the exact same thing again, right? You can see here that the G will have a major chord, so the G's triad chord is a major chord because it has a capitalized number, okay? So, and remember, to work it out, you take the first, third, and fifth, right? And between a first, third, and fifth, there are 2 tones. Between the first and the third, and then between the third and the fifth, there is 1.5, right? So, G, I won't work out all the chords because that will just take forever, again. I'll just work out 1 major, 1 minor, and then diminished, right? So we're at G, we have to go up 2 tones. Right, okay, so from G to A, we have 1 tone because you have G and G sharp, and then from A to get to B, you have A and A sharp, right? So there's 2 notes in between these notes. Like, so G to A, 2 notes, A to B, 2 notes, right? So that is 2 tones. So we know the next chord is B. Okay, from B, we should have 1.5 tones till our next note. So B to C, 1 note, C to D, C, C sharp, that's 2 notes. So together that's 3 notes, that's 1.5, right? So that is our next note, D. So if you play these notes together, you are playing a G major chord. Okay, and in our last key, that also had a G major chord, and so you can see there that some keys share the same chords, and that is basically that is used as a technique, like a compositional technique, to move from different keys, because some keys share the same chords. You can start in one key, then move to a different one by using the chords that both the keys share, right? Which is called pivot chord modulation, but that is for another lesson, right? So the next chord that we have is A. That is a minor chord, right? You can tell because it's not capitalized. Okay, so we have A, right? Now, from A to B, we have one note. Okay. Oh, I know we don't. Sorry, we have two notes, right? A and A sharp. Okay. Then from B to C, we have one note because there's no B sharp, right? So that's 1.5 together, 3 notes. So we know that C is our third note, right? So like I say, from a first to a flattened third, that's 1.5. Then from a flattened third to a fifth, that's 2 tones. That is our minor triad chord spelling. Okay, so we're at C, right? And then from C to D, C sharp, 2 notes. D to E, D sharp, 2 notes. Put that together, 2 tones, 4 notes. That is our next note. Okay, E. So we now have an A minor chord, which means that we have our first 2 chords in the key of G major. Okay, now I'll just work out the diminished one for you, and this chord happens to be a sharp note, which is pretty cool. So we have F sharp, and like I say, between the chord spelling for a diminished chord is 1.5, 1.5, first, flattened third, flattened fifth. Okay, so from the F sharp to the G, that is 1 note. From a G to an A, there's 2 notes, G and G sharp. Right, okay, so that's 3 notes, 1.5. So that means that A is our next note. Okay, then from A to C, A to B, A and A sharp, then B to C is just B, right? So that's 3 notes. So C is our next note. So we have now figured out F sharp diminished. Which, if you are a beginner and you played that chord, I'm sure people will be quite surprised, because F sharp diminished, it's quite an intimidating chord. Anything with sharps or flats, that's when it starts getting a bit more complicated. But in what I'm trying to show you here, no matter what notes you're doing, it all works exactly the same. Right, now now I've showed you how to work out all the triad chords in a major key. Now all I need to do is show you how to work out all the triad chords in a minor key. And again, you'll notice a lot of patterns that are very similar. Okay, so I'm going to take the relative minor of G major. Okay, so like I said before, if you take the 6th interval, the 6th note of a major key, and then write out the key from that note, you find the major key's relative minor, right? So in G major, you can see here that E is the 6th note, right? So if I write out the same notes starting from E, right? You'll notice it's the exact same notes, but they just start in a different place. But I can guarantee you, if you just wrote down the letter E and used the 2 methods I showed you to find out a minor key, right, and you wrote out the E minor key, these are the notes that would be in it. And like I say, what you notice is the same notes as G major, because every major key has a relative minor, right? And again, that's another compositional technique. Because you can essentially get from one key to another, there are ways you can change from a major key to a minor key within a song to give it more variety. But again, that's something for a later date. So where was I? So we have our minor key here, and those Roman numerals that I showed before, how I've written out, like I said, if you take the sixth note and then write it out from E, you get the same notes, but you just started from a different place. So what you do with the Roman numerals in a minor key, right? Every single minor key uses the same Roman numerals, like the same order as every other minor key. Same as how every major key will use these ones in this order. So every third note in a major key will be a minor note, a minor chord, right? And then every seventh note in a major key will be a diminished, right? So what we will do is, since I am using the relative minor, I will show you this as a good example, right? This E is a minor, okay? So this E down here is going to be a minor, okay? Let me just write this out for you. Like I say, it's very good to take notes from this, just so you can take them away for yourself. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment, because I know this is pretty complicated. So see, because music theory, it's quite hard to get when you first start, but once you know it, it is brilliant. Right, so I haven't finished it, but what you notice here so far, right? The E here, right? Even though it's now the first note because we're in E minor, the E up here is also a minor too, right? The next note after that is a diminished. What do you notice about that? That is also a diminished, but it's just the second instead, right? And then here, the first, right, that's a major. So now that's a major, right? This A is a minor, so this is a minor. And then this B is a minor, so that's a minor. This C is a major, so we have a major there too. This D is a major, so that's a major. And then we are back to E, and that is a minor. Okay? Now, just like the major scale, that does not change for any minor key, basically. So I highly advise to write this down. Just say, for all major keys, this is how you work out the triad chords. And then for every minor key, this is how you work out its triad chords. Now, all I've done is just go from this point and then carry it on, right? Because it's the relative minor, right? And every major key will have a relative minor, so it works for every single key, right? Every single minor key will follow this pattern, and every single major key has a relative minor. So if you want to work out a major key, then write all these below it, and then you want to remember what the minor chord spelling system is. You can just take whatever key you're in, take the relative minor note and then write them out from there as their new intervals, but keep the values the same. Okay? Or if you want to disregard all that and just remember that this is how you work out all the notes in a minor, all the chords in a minor key, and then all the notes in a major, all the chords rather. Right, so all I'm going to show you now, I'm just going to work out a major chord in this minor key, and a minor chord and a diminished. Okay, so since we're in a minor key, let's work out the first chord, which will always be a minor. Okay, so we have an E. Right. Now, from an E to the flattened third, we have 1.5 tones. Right, so from E to F sharp, we have a E and an F. Right, that's all that's between them. Right, so to get from an E to an F, right, there's 2 notes. Sorry, an E to an F sharp, right, 2 notes. Then from an F sharp to a G, there's just 1 note. Right, so that's 3 notes in total. So F sharp, okay, oops, sorry, G rather. Scribble that out. Right, E, G. From there to there, we have 1.5. Then from our flattened third to our fifth, there are 2. So from a G to an A, there's 2 notes. G and G sharp. From an A to a B, there's A and A sharp. Okay, so we have B. Right, so that is E minor. Okay, let's work out our first major chord that occurs in the minor scale. Right, so the third interval or scale degree, third note in the key, scale, whatever you want to call it, in a minor key will always be a major chord, right? Because of this code, it always stays the same. And then with the major keys, this always stays the same. Okay, so we now have G, okay, from a first to a third, like I said before, we have 2 tones, 4 notes. So from G to A, 2 notes. From A to B, 2 notes, right? So B will be our third in our G major chord. Okay, now from a B to a D, from a B to a C, that's just 1 note. Then from a C to a D, we have C and C sharp, so that's 2 notes. Pull that together, that's 3, which is 1.5 tones. So that must mean that D is our last note in this chord. So we have now worked out G major, okay. Now one last chord. Oh, I missed that actually. F sharp diminished, okay. And because it's a relative minor, it has the same notes. If you worked out all these chords, they would have these exact same chords as its relative major, basically. And one thing to remember, that the major scale, the major key, is the most important key out of all. And then every other type of scale is just a variation of the major scale, which is why the minor scale exists within the major, because it's just a variation, right? So just imagine major at the top, and then you can get to every other scale from being in some form of major key. Okay, so one last chord, our diminished chord in our minor key. Right, so in that case, it's our second interval, which is F sharp, which we've already figured out here, because it's the same key basically, but that's the minor, right? So between F and A, right, there will be 1.5. Right, from F sharp to G, there's 1 note. Then from G sharp to A, that's 2 notes. So together, 3 notes, 1.5 tones. and then from our flattened third to our flattened fifth in our diminished chord spelling, right? A to C, right? Again, it will be 1.5, right? So A to B, A and A sharp, and then from B to a C, that's just one note because there's no B sharp. Okay, so it will be a C note. So that is our F sharp diminished. There we go. We figured out a major, a minor, and a diminished chord in a minor key, right? And then that is everything that I have for you in these part lessons. If you've stuck through all of this, I thank you so much. I honestly hope this helps you guys, and I really want you to understand it. So if you have any questions, just ask, and just leave a comment. I don't do a lot with myself, so if you leave a comment, I'll reply pretty quickly. I hope you enjoyed it, guys. Good luck with whatever instrument you're playing. Honestly, take care. God bless. Thank you.